Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow! So you really wanted to come on the show again, huh? Okay, well, she's here. We might as well invite her to stay. Former Governor Sarah Palin. Excellent, okay. When we start up, Basil, I want you to, what? Oh, okay. Good morning. Welcome to Basil BuddhaCat Presents. My name is David Stevenson. I'm Basil's co-host. Center slot, Basil BuddhaCat, host of the show. And we now have been joined by actually 3 guests. We have with us, another cat named Basil, who's from Florida, we know at this point. And we have the Buddha, along with us also, and former Governor Sarah Palin of Alaska, who is greeting us with the traditional Sarah Palin wink, as we've come to know from previous shows. Thank you for joining us, all 3 of you. Basil, your hair looks pretty good. How's mine look? Frumpy, he says. Okay. Anyway, so in our show Friday night, you wanted to make a note about something about our guest, Basil, who has now been partially obscured by Governor Palin. But something about Basil that would be of interest to the audience. Okay? Okay, you're going to give me some clues, and I'll try to figure out what this is all about. And feel free to make some guesses also, former Governor Palin, and also Buddha, who probably knows all anyway, so probably knows what this is all about anyway, but it's just not telling. Okay, Basil says that his guest, Basil, is from a town in Florida known as Sanford. Okay, well, yeah, we know a little bit about something Sanford lately in the news. We know that there was a horrible tragedy in Sanford that involved a gentleman who was part of the neighborhood watch for his neighborhood, for his gated community, and also a young man who was visiting his dad, who lived in the community and was out walking in the evening, and an altercation took place. So I'm presuming Basil has, our guest Basil has some connectivity to that, at least as far as living in the same town and having been a part of hearing the discussion between the humans that are in his house and also the humans that are in other houses. Oh. Really? Well, apparently, our guest, Basil, belonged, well, pardon me, it's not the term I want to use. He was the owner of a family that included George Zimmerman, who is the gentleman who was part of the neighborhood watch and who ended up tragically. We don't know some of the details. We know some details. We've heard, a lot of discussion from members of both families, but tragically ended up shooting Trayvon Martin. Okay. So you belonged, the family of George Zimmerman belonged to you. They were your people. And there's another side of the story, another angle to this? Okay. Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, apparently, Basil, our guest, became separated by way of a cat door that didn't want to reopen when he tried to get back in, got separated from the Zimmerman family, and ended up being adopted by Trayvon Martin's dad. And so he's been in both households, and he knows each family intimately, he says. He says he knows each family quite well, and he can shed some interesting, as he says that, a couple of bits of fur fall off. He can shed some light on this entire tragedy, because he knows both families very, very well. Okay, Basil, how do you want us to proceed on this? Do you want to just have our guest Basil tell you information, and have you pass that along to me, and I can pass it along to the audience and ask questions back in return, or would you prefer that that I go right into asking some questions of our guest Basil? Buddha? Buddha says that not much surprises him in life, and not much intrigues him, but this certainly does, because Buddha has absorbed a lot of this incredible amount of media coverage to this situation, to this tragedy. Now, I want to point out before we get started, now that I know where we are in terms of our discussion points, that I noticed on Fox News this morning, something caught my ear. Every other station has been talking about the only real fact in the case that we're certain of, and that's that George Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin. The details around that are in dispute. A lot of things are being said on all sides about this. But the terminology that's being used is killed, because that's in fact. The gun went off, the gun was in his possession, the gun went off, and the young man is dead. We know that to be a fact. That's pretty much all we know for certain without a full investigation, which apparently will take place both on a local and a federal level. But at any rate, so I'm watching Fox News this morning on the one of their morning shows, and sure enough, they make the statement that George Zimmerman murdered Trayvon Martin. And I thought that was interesting, and I guess a lot of folks, probably more likely those that are qualified to report on Fox News, don't seem to understand that there's a very powerful difference between the word killed and the word murdered. Bullet fired, bullet in the hand, gun in possession, bullet fired, killed. The word murder, or referring to someone as having murdered someone else, implies something far more serious in a legal sense than the word killed. When you've murdered someone, you've not just killed them, but you've killed them with some degree of culpability. It wasn't an accident. You could have a gun that accidentally goes off, as happens many times in many American tragedies involving a child getting a hold of a gun in a drawer belonging to his or her parents and playing with it, and the gun goes off, and either that child or a friend of that child or another family member is killed. And certainly no less a tragedy, particularly, maybe even more a tragedy in the sense when someone's killed by the negligence of or the unwillingness of a parent to keep a gun in a safe spot. And this happens, literally thousands of times a year in America. It is indeed a tragedy, and very much on the level of the tragedy we're talking about here. But when you murder somebody, there's some degree of culpability. There's some degree of intent. You really can't unintentionally murder someone. You really can't unintentionally. You've got to have some level of responsibility, which is brought forth by an investigation and a subsequent trial. When you murder somebody, you can, of course, certainly have in what's referred to as premeditated murder, where you get a weapon and you plan out in advance and seek out the person that you intend to kill, and you seek them out and you murder them. Okay, there's other levels of murder. There's other levels of homicide that are less severe, but all of them rise above the standard of killing someone. Killing is, as I say, a tragedy, and we have agreement on that around the table. Oh, Governor Palin says, unless it's a wolf. Basil, you invited her back. Okay, you invited her back on. Basil doesn't like the fact that she's winking, and she doesn't like the fact that Basil's ears are twitching, but that's just, we're going to have a civil conversation about this, and we're going to get through it, so everybody behave yourself. Okay, so at any rate, our guest Basil is going to discuss some of the intimate details, I guess, of the two families. Okay, now we do know that Trayvon Martin and his dad, who lives in your neighborhood and who you've been part of their family, Trayvon Martin's dad and mom are divorced. His mom lives in another town. They don't live together, obviously. And so Trayvon was out of school, and we haven't quite figured out for certain. Oh, okay. Okay, you know that he was suspended from school, okay? And it was due to that suspension that he came to spend some time with his dad, okay? Okay? Now, what is the family life like? Is it a normal family life in your estimation, based on what you've seen and what you've gathered from talking to other cats who have families? What did he say? Okay, yeah. I have to, of course, have Basil interpret the other Basil, our guest Basil, and then pass it along to me, and I have to interpret it for the audience. Not for the Buddha, because the Buddha, in fact, speaks every language on earth fluently. I guess that's just part of being the Buddha. Okay, so the normal family lives of both families, he's telling me, both the Martin family and the Zimmerman family are fairly unremarkable. Pretty much normal family lives. People that probably, in normal circumstances, probably would not have even paid attention to one another or noted anything unusual in nothing unusual at all. Would have been just regular, average people who acknowledge each other in passing in the course of a day's travels. Okay. Then what? Then why? Why? Tell us what exactly caused this tragedy to happen, and do you know the facts of the case? Okay. He says he's been called by the grand jury, or at least he believes he's going to be called by the grand jury, so he can't discuss some of the details that he knows because he doesn't want it leaked out to everyone in advance. He wants there to be something, And in fact, he says he may actually end up writing a book about his experience. Okay. So, what can you tell us? Okay, I'm going to let... oh, did you have something you wanted to add to this, Basil? Okay. Host Basil BuddhaCat says, you've got to proceed very, very slowly and very, very discreetly in discussing this with him, because it's obviously a very traumatic experience. We understand that. Okay. Basil BuddhaCat presents. May I help you? In my wildest, I have to tell you, Basil, it's Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Arpaio, can you give us some indication as to... So we just want to make sure we actually know who we have on the phone. Oh, okay. That pretty much does it. I think we can trust this to be Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and the reason why we can do it is because he's cracking his bullwhip as he speaks. Okay. Well, we'll determine through our phone crew, which includes the Tweety, of course. Tweety's going to double check. Tweety's going to go and he's going to look at the caller ID, so he knows that the call is actually... Tweety says the call is actually coming in from an Arizona area code. Okay. Tweety says he has pretty good voice recognition. He's holding up a card from behind, just outside the studio door, and the card says that he's pretty certain that in fact it is Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Okay, let me just ask, if I may, just one more question that I think in my mind's eye will determine my certainty, or increase my level of certainty that it's actually Sheriff Joe Arpaio on the phone. Okay, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Sheriff Arpaio, if I may, who is your favorite political figure in Danbury, Connecticut? Yeah, that's it. Basil, he says it's Mayor Mark Boughton. So I think we can count on this guy being the real thing, because otherwise he wouldn't. Now, why is that? Why is that? Okay, Sheriff Arpaio, we want to dig a little deeper on this, because I really would like to be 100% certain that it's you we have on the phone. Could you give us some indication as to why you have found Mayor Mark Boughton of Danbury to be your favorite politician in Danbury? Okay. He says he likes the ICE issue. He's followed the ICE issue. He thinks ICE obviously is great. If only they would be a little bit rougher on these dag-nammed illegals. And I'm using his words, not mine. These are Sheriff Arpaio, or these are caller-in's words. If ICE would just be a little stricter and a little less secretive, and rather than spirit people away to federal prisons and then to ultimately to deportation or worse, then he would be happier with ICE. He doesn't think it's effective enough just to split up families and spirit people out of the community and send them packing. He thinks a couple, 3 or 4 or 100 lashes might be helpful too. Okay. Sheriff, you don't have any children, do you? Says nope, no use for them. Okay. Okay, well, I think you have some indication, some thoughts as to what my next question would be when we're talking about, if we were talking about you and children. Because I'm sure you would be probably a fairly strict parent and might have gotten a lot of use on that bullwhip along the way other than on folks that you've arrested. It says, it's a thought. Basil, where should I go with this conversation? Should I continue this conversation? Or Sheriff Arpaio, Basil's saying that he wants you to weigh in on the tragic incident in Florida. And specifically, what I'd like to know is what's your thought about, now I don't know if you watched, he says, he watches Fox 24/7. So you were watching this morning when a commentator on Fox referred to George Zimmerman as having murdered Trayvon Martin. Okay. Sheriff Arpaio says, he heard that, and he doesn't even believe that. He thinks more than likely Trayvon Martin probably grabbed the gun, fired the gun. The bullet bounced off something, carried him back, and killed Trayvon Martin. Really? Okay. Well, I haven't heard that from any folks that have commented, family members of George Zimmerman. Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, at any rate, Basil's saying, time to say goodbye to this dude. Okay. Sheriff Arpaio, we'll try to talk to you again on a future show. We have your number on the caller ID, and now we know how to reach you. Thank you very much. Bye. Okay. We want to continue the discussion. Now tell us a little more about the families. You mentioned that they were pretty much your average, everyday families, nothing horrible about either family, pretty much normal folks. Now, do you have any inkling as to why George Zimmerman carried a gun on the neighborhood watch? Did he feel under normal circumstances that he had reason to fear people in the neighborhood, or that something might happen that might have him have cause to defend himself? Okay, no. The answer is pretty much a straightforward no. Was Mr. Zimmerman aware of the law that the Florida legislature passed and that the governor signed regarding level of response that's allowable when someone feels threatened? Okay, he says he was aware of that. He wasn't sure how he felt about it, but he says he overheard him discussing it with his brother, and since it was the law, he felt that entitled him to carrying a gun and to use force if necessary. Now, you haven't been in the household since. Oh, okay. Our guest Basil says that he actually travels back and forth from house to house. He figured that cat door out, and he's got a cat door on both ends now, so he's actually able to come and go as he pleases from house to house. Maybe not at this point. Maybe at this point he won't be able to go from house to house without being observed by TV cameras, but he does in fact go back and forth from house to house because he gets twice the meals. Okay. So what have you heard, if you can tell us, of conversations since this tragedy in the Zimmerman household? Says he can't really go into detail about that because, again, he's expecting a subpoena from the grand jury at any time. Governor Palin, you have something to add? Okay. Governor Palin says she's having trouble hearing me, that I need to get with her on the cell phone. Okay, I'm going to dial you up. Or would you prefer to dial me up, okay? No, I'll dial you up. Governor Palin, are you there? Okay, good. Yeah. So Were you winking the other eye before? She says, wouldn't you like to know? Okay, Basil says that I can retire Governor Palin to behind him so she can scratch behind the ears. Okay, fair enough. Okay, Governor Palin, I'm sorry, but we're going to go on with this conversation without you. Okay, now, what additional information can you shed on this situation, on this tragedy, to let us know anything we should expect from the investigation? Okay, he's saying that he understands George Zimmerman's, his family's concern about the whole situation and worrying about him. But in fact, he says that he can tell us, because we've seen now in a video of Mr. Zimmerman at the police station being released, that he was not injured in the altercation. Okay, so you understand that his brother would say that, even though in fact it was not the case, that the brother's looking out for him. His brother is looking out for George Zimmerman, and is worried about what might come of this, and so he's trying to standing behind his brother as best he can. Okay, Basil, you have something to add to that? Basil said, if something happened with a brother of his, he'd sell him out in a second. Basil, you would not do that. Said, nope, but it happened to him once, where a brother of his sold him out, and that's how he ended up in the shelter where Kristen ended up adopting him. Well, see, there's something good that comes to something bad, Basil. The Buddha, in fact, is yes, okay. Basil says, yep, he gave it a second thought. He realizes that that's the case, and the Buddha is definitely correct, and Basil is very understanding that many things in life that seem bad at the time actually happen for good reasons. Now, we haven't had much of a chance at this point to talk in detail with our guest, Basil, about this tragedy in Sanford, Florida, but we're going to try to get back with him on via phone, or Basil will speak to him via phone and translate on a future show. But as for now, this has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents, so we're going to have to sign out for now. Yes, Basil? Basil, yeah, I've been monopolizing the show more than you, but come on, you haven't had much to say. He will. Okay, this has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I'm David Stevenson, Basil's co-host, interpreter, and chief gopher. Basil BuddhaCat, center slot. And our guests this evening, this morning, have been Basil from Florida, someone who's going to be becoming a very renowned figure in the investigation of this tragedy, apparently, and also the Buddha. Thanks. You enjoy your day. Bye. They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street. And Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, on Wall Street. Meow.